times. And then he gave me illustrations. So he prayed for her healing, Mary's healing, what he called conditionally. Namely, if it would be a good thing for them and for God's glory. But most deeply, he prayed that they would be satisfied in God, whatever he did. And God answered that prayer. Psalm 84:11, no good thing will God withhold, and God withheld no good thing from him when his wife died. And that's why he said, I am satisfied with God. All of this, quote, springs from taking God at His word, believing what He says. Now my question is, how did He get to be this way? Where did this come from? Where did this life come from? What are the roots of such a utter submission and surrender to the sovereign will of God that He can say in the face of His beloved as she goes through rheumatic fever into heaven, I am satisfied with God. Where did that come from? So I want to go back and tell his story and show you what the biographers will not show you, to my utter dismay. I've done these talks now for what? Is this 18 years or something? And I've learned a lesson about biographers. They're untrustworthy, theologically. It's not a joke. Most people who write popular biographies, no, I think you could just generalize. With some rare exceptions. George Marsden's biography is a magnificent exception, and Ian Murray's, and there, of course, there are many, I suppose, exceptions. But by and large, when you're reading the lives of popular saints, biographers don't like theology. Biographers don't like doctrine. They want to tell an interesting story. They don't want to get bogged down in doctrine. They want to sell books to Arminians and Calvinists. To my utter dismay, I looked through, I knew exactly where I'd find it if I was going to find it, because it happened in a certain place in his life. It's not there. It's not in this one. It's not in Delighted in God. It's not in all the ones I looked at. It's not there. The key to his life and where this comes from is not told in any of the biographies that I looked at. But you can find it if you go there or get the Dust and Ashes 2-volume version that's so boring. Let's tell the story a little bit here. His father was an unbeliever in Germany, Prussia. George grew up a liar, a thief. His mother died when he was 14. He doesn't record its impact because, as far as I can tell, it had none. He was cruising about the city, he says, half intoxicated on the day she died at age 14. He went on living a bawdy life until he landed in prison at age 16 because of thievery. His father bought his way out of prison, beat him, sent him off to another town. He began to make a living with his academic skills by tutoring in Latin, French, mathematics. Finally went to the University of Halle to study divinity. With 900 divinity students at the University of Halle, founded by his great hero eventually, August Franke, who also founded orphan houses and where the roots really go back. 900, and he said later, probably 9 of them feared the Lord. In those days, divinity was a pathway to a good living, and his father wanted him, as an unbeliever, to have a good living, so go study divinity and get yourself a church. And that's what he went off to do when he was 20. And then the day came. I love these stories. This is why I read biography. I love the grace of God breaking into people's lives. He was invited to a Bible study. You know what they do at this Bible study? They read the Bible They sing a song, they pray, and they read a printed sermon because it was against the law to preach if you don't have an ordained pastor in the room. So they read a sermon. It was to me as if I had found something after which I had been seeking all my life. I immediately wished to go. In other words, just the invitation went like a sword to his heart. Just the invitation at the appointed hour went home. To his amazement, Mueller said, the whole made a deep impression on me. I was happy, though if I had been asked why I was happy, I could not have clearly explained. I have not the least doubt that on that evening, God began a work of grace in me. That evening was the turning point in my life. That was 1825. He's 20 years old. Now, that was the decisive turning point. You'll read about that in all the biographies. But there was another turning point, as decisive as far as the roots of his life go, which you never read about, except to say something happened there and not tell you what it was. So I'm going to tell you what it was. He came to England with the London Missionary Society and then fell out of favor eventually and left the London Missionary Society because he became disillusioned, as I said earlier, with some of their eschatology and practices. While he was studying there in London with the London Missionary Society, he got sick. This feels very much like my own story here. I have often said, I bless you, God, for mononucleosis. And I bless you, God, for this sickness of George Mueller. And he did too. He got sick. In fact, he almost died. As he began to get better, he was counseled, go to Teignmouth. 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 The mouth of the Tein River on the coast. And recover a little. He goes there in August of 1829. So now he's 24 years old, roughly. And while he's there, there's a little teeny chapel, Ebenezer Chapel, with a few dozen people. And he attends the chapel. And the man who preached is never named in any of his writings. And I wasn't able to find it in the biographies, which is just like God. Just like God, that the decisive man in his life would not be named. Some of you are going to be that, you know, for somebody. You're going to be that. You need to be okay with that. You're going to never be named. And the man that you spent an hour with, or 100 hours with, who will go on to be the Billy Graham, or just some faithful pastor, it's written down, brothers. It is written down. And this man, we will gather around him in heaven and say, I'm glad you were faithful that Sunday morning. In fact, it wasn't just a Sunday morning. He sat down in this man's presence and listened to him preach. And then, by virtue of a strange providence, the house where Mueller was invited to spend the time for recuperation, that man was spending 10 days there. And that man was a very devoted lover of the doctrines of grace. Through the instrumentality of this brother, this is a quote, through the instrumentality of this brother, the Lord bestowed a great blessing upon me, for which I shall have cause to thank Him throughout eternity. Before this period, I had been much opposed to the doctrines of election, particular redemption, final persevering grace, so much so that a few days after my arrival in Teignmouth, I called